Namaste, I'm Roshan Cariappa and welcome to another episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. The focus of our discussion today is the future of work, and we have two very senior leaders from the HR and recruitment industry. I have with me Gaurav Chattur, who is the Managing Director, Asia Pacific of Catenon India. Hi, Gaurav.
Hello, hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And we have K Sudarshan, the Managing Director and Regional Chair for Asia at EMA Partners International. Hi, Sudarshan.
Yeah, hi. Morning, Carrie.
Morning.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah.
Yeah, great to have you here. So maybe we'll begin with the focus itself, right? So what does the future of work look like? And I think both of you can take a stab at this to begin the discussion. You could speak about what it means for employers and job seekers from both ends. So maybe Sudarshan, we can start with you, and then we can move to Gaurav.
Okay. So I think there was, the entire world went into a turmoil. People were not sure where to begin when the lockdown and happened to start with. So how that has impacted the way we are thinking about jobs and careers today is this. If you look at it, I think companies have realized in the last 6 months that actually we can do more with less. So that means there has been a sharper focus on productivity. And if you overall look at the workforce, most organizations actually, they've been carrying people, at least 20 to 30% of the workforce were far less productive than what they expected the productivity levels had to be. So the difference between performance and non-performance became much more starker during the epidemic or pandemic. So that is the biggest learning for employers and for employees. I think it's about saying that how can I be effective on the job? What can I do? And so that is number one. And number two, of course, we also had a lot of resources which we didn't need otherwise. In terms of it could be starting from office space to the travel, which people there was a joke. It sometimes people said, morning I have breakfast in Bangalore, my lunch in Mumbai, and dinner in Delhi. So people had those kind of punishing travel schedules. Though they were themselves pleasantly surprised that when work got done without doing many of those things which they were used to doing in the past. So a lot of changes, behavioral changes, the the style of work, so to say, how we used to execute, we all preferred face-to-face meetings. So but in the sense, but I also think these are all temporary. Okay, we will go back to some level of normalcy. We are human beings, we prefer face-to-face interactions. So while this video is what we can do given the situation, but it's not far off to think that we will go back to our normal work schedule, but with a few changes going forward in terms of the way we look at employees and the way employees look at careers. So those things will change.
Right.
And that's my quick take.
Yeah. No, I do believe that a lot of the predictions coming out, etc., are over-indexing to the present in terms of what will change. Gaurav, so as Sudarshan mentioned, a greater focus on productivity. But what are some of those things that we will carry forward from this year, from 2020 onwards, that will have more of a lasting impact on how we see things going into the future?
Yeah, so I think the future of work, there'll be few pronounced themes. One of them is going to be flexibility. And I say flexibility not just for the individual, the employee, but also for the organization. How they want to organize their workforce, where they want the workforce to be, how much of the workforce they want in-house, how much of it should be gig or subcontracted. So that's going to change. I think the employee will have a greater say in also deciding whether the employee wants to come to office to work or whether the employee wants to work remotely. Now that the myth that remote working in many industries can't happen, has been dispelled, right? The other pronounced theme is, digitally enabled businesses. So all facets of business are now disrupted. Whether it be employee interaction, customer interaction, even supply chain. So massive proliferation of digital themes. So there's this quote going on around the internet, which says that there are decades when nothing happens and there are weeks within which decades happen. So that's how fast the digital transformation has taken place in the last 6 months. And I think some of it is here to stay, right? Many jobs are going to become obsolete. Like Sudarshan rightly pointed out, organization carried a lot of inefficiencies in terms of, not just people who were not adding value, but also a lot of people. So that has been surprisingly called out in this remote working scenario. People have been sort of found wanting or very easily exposed when you're isolated at home versus being in an office space, contrary as it may seem. So a lot of jobs will become redundant, and a lot of new jobs will be created. So from the employee standpoint, I think it becomes very important that they keep their skills updated. And we can talk more on what skills and all. I think what is going to be very, very important to also understand is that competencies will endure. So learnability is like a very important competency that will see its way through. Adaptability. Now I say learnability and adaptability differently, because adaptability means, are you now able to adapt to a new circumstance of work, a new way of engaging? Yeah, so that will endure. The competency of communication will become pronounced, really, really important. And when I say communication, I'm not just talking about oral and written communication, but it's about something like what you do, right, at Bharat Varta. Disrupt how you reach your audience. So communication using all means available. And then, of course, empathy. Are you able to, without meeting face-to-face, connect with people, whether it be an employee or a customer, whether you're able to understand their problems over a digital medium? I think all these things will characterize the future.
Right. So just to add to that point, I mean, so we look at the way people are looking at the jobs in the future. Say, just take a simple example of, say, financial services distribution today. When I say that, okay, I'm launching, say, a loan product or a credit card or whatever it may be, immediately people used to think, okay, how many feet on the street I have? That was the old concept. So then the last 6 months, the concept of feet on the street disappeared, but still companies continue to sell. They reach customers digitally. They used to do that, right? So the entire paradigm of reaching a consumer has changed. So that will bring forth a big change in the volume of hiring for many large companies, which they believe that their products which have to reach, or services which has to reach the consumer in various locations and so on. Companies always believed in this physical channel. So that is something which is going to probably change forever, the way companies are looking at the costs of carrying such a large workforce and how they reach their consumer.
Right. No, from an acquisition perspective, I think digital is a no-brainer, right? I mean, people have made that shift in terms of going into digital mediums for acquisition as such, especially in financial services, right? And even if you look at the relationship manager of today or the feet on street of today, he or she has to have that higher order skill set, right? In terms of being a little more consultative, being an advisor and so on, not just connecting people to product, right? So that is that's absolutely on point. So Sudarshan, let's look at IT services, for example. It has that classic bottom of the pyramid being way too big problem, right? Which we keep talking about, in industry forums for years and years now, right? Do you see a time for reckoning of that model sometime soon? Because as you mentioned, people are looking at the balance sheet, they're looking at productivity and so on and so forth. What's really going to happen to that huge class of middle managers that have been built up over the last 20 years?
Yeah, so I was just coming to that. The industry is about 25 years old in its current form. Maybe somewhere in the early mid 90s is when what should I say? They were amassing people as an industry. So they actually don't have a bottom of the pyramid problem. They have a middle of the pyramid problem. They have a bloated middle. And it's again a classic case. Industry insiders will admit that about 30% of the workforce are actually useless in the current context. They're not bad people. It's about relearning and reskilling. I think Gaurav mentioned a point about learnability. How can they adapt? And also, what has happened is certain processes and which they used to execute, at the back end, which today machines are doing that. So you have AI, ML, all those things kicking in, and so with this rule-based engines and algorithms coming in, you don't need people for many of these jobs, which earlier it used to be done by people in a BPO or in an IT services company. So those jobs have disappeared. So learnability, they're all, I mean, if you go to a typical, the website of any of these large IT services players, you can, in fact, I do know one company where they've actually more or less rechristened all their senior leadership with, they've somewhere put digital, they've actually, so they're actually reorienting themselves to the reality. Now but I'm only, so that is one part. Okay. The second part, I think, is itself the cost you spoke about. uh, so somebody with 1 or 2 years of experience or at the entry level can do something very similar to what somebody with a 10-15 year experience, person who's doing what he's doing in an IT services company. So that is where I think companies are really struggling with that, because that, given that they're such a large employer in the Indian context, anything you try and do there in terms of letting people go or something, it's a hot potato. I think nobody wants to take the bull by its horns as we speak. So companies are trying their own methods in terms of trying to reskill people and kind of redeploy and so on. And that's what is happening. So that problem is not going away anywhere. Carry, to your point,
Right.
it is something which all these companies have to face in the next, if not today, I think in the next couple of years, I think they all have to address these issues.
Right. Gaurav, slightly different question for you. This Sudarshan alluded to that as well. This whole man management, process management is being automated away, and higher order thinking, higher order skills are coming to the fore, right? So in many ways, we're seeing management itself being disrupted. So what should this new middle management look like, or do you think that it makes sense even to have this middle management layer at this point of time?
Oh, great question, Carrie. I think in general, organizations will become flatter. So if at all there will be a middle management, it will probably be just a very thin layer and a very hands-on layer in the future. Already we see a demand for a technical project manager versus a project manager. So back when I was at Infi, we used to have a software engineer, a team lead, project manager, senior project manager, delivery manager, DVM, and then the PU leadership. That's too much of a hierarchy, to have. Most of it, like Sudarshan alluded to, will be done away with automation. What you require in the middle management now is, also the ability to rediscover their careers. So whether they want to become like a technology evangelist, or whether they want to get into a sales, account management, or client partner role, they need to really take an initiative. So many things can be done by organizations around this, and many things can be done by individuals around this. Apprenticeship within the organization is a very simple way of also sort of helping people discover whether they want to become a technology specialist. They could, work under a really under the CTO or the CIO in that organization and see if that is their passion. Or they could work closely with the client partner and see if client management and that stream becomes there. Straight way up, I don't think so is anymore an option for these the middle management, especially in IT services, but also in other industries. In
Right.
general, it's going to get flatter.
Right. Sudarshan, so what do you see as a consequence of what Gaurav is saying, right? So considering organizations have to get flatter, hierarchies will have to be, I won't say done away with, but will change shape and form. What do you see as a consequence of that?
So see, what is there is there. So there we will, companies will hope for natural attrition and so on and so forth. If they are not able to kind of redeploy a lot of their workforce over time, they will look to get more efficient. Okay, so while that being that, what in future, what kind of skills which will work, right? Is that right, Kari? That is
Yeah,
what you're
pretty
asking.
much. Yeah.
So pretty much. So I think the fundamental shift is today, what are we looking for in any employee? I mean, forget the industry. It could be manufacturing or it could be. So today, what is core? Is that technology is or digital, if you have to put it that way, is actually uh, it's an enabler for every business. No matter whether you are in food delivery to mobility to manufacturing. So the future employee is somebody who is not intimidated by technology or digital tools, somebody who has the ability to embrace technology to solve business problems. And this is quite applicable to leaders as well. So today's leader has to really think, how am I going to deploy technology or digital tools to solve business problems? So if you have that mindset, so which is very important for succeeding in the future, because today, if every business has its typical friction points, which can be solved by technology. So right from supply chain to even if in the manufacturing, if you look at the floor in manufacturing or look at quality, I mean, you take anything. Or if you in a consumer context, if you look at sales and distribution, your feet on the street. I mean, feet on the street, we still say feet on the street, but how are they enabled? How do we get real-time information? So everywhere there is we're deploying tech tools or digital tools. So people who are very comfortable and who have the ability to embrace technology to solve business problems are the ones who will succeed in the future. So that's very important. So I think tech, digital, I mean, these are something you should not start learning on the job. It should very much become part of our curriculum, and it should become ingrained in us as college graduates, as they pass out of their institutes or wherever they study, or from
Right.
school. That should become part of the thing, which I think it's going to be, because even with this advent of online classes, I think kids are getting used far more. They have no choice, right? Isn't it? So I think that
Right.
will come in, kick in big time as we go forward.
Right. Yeah. So while we're talking about how managers have to sort of reorient themselves to this whole new changing paradigm, right? So, Gaurav, this also means that leadership has to come to the fore, right? I mean, true leadership as such, because there are going to be some difficult choices to make. There are going to be some hard challenges to face, and so on and so forth. What will the leaders of tomorrow look like?
One, I think first and foremost, the leader has to be digitally savvy. I mean, there is no other option. Whichever industry, and I'm talking about even very traditional industries like engineering. The leader still has to be very, very digitally hands-on and savvy. Second, I think very important is highly connected. So the leader should be approachable also through various media, and should also collect his inputs not just from bottom up within the organization, but from the world in general through multiple sources, including social media, Twitter, and otherwise. Right, the leader has to be a multidisciplinary person. So just being very good at your stream of work will not make you the right choice for the top job.
Right.
And I think one of the most important characteristics that is going to define the leader of the future is decisiveness. Uh, a lot of leadership and a lot of traditional industry, takes too long to try things. I think the technology way of working, fail fast, but don't die thinking, is going to apply to many other industries, because that's how fast the disruption is happening. You could
Right.
become irrelevant very, very soon if you don't adapt. So I think these are some of the most important characters. One other thing, of course, I repeat, is empathy. I think more and more people become distant in terms of physically, not being in the same room. More and more it is going to be important for leaders to exercise empathy.
Right. Right. So, Sudarshan, I mean, my father's generation or whatever were, their career was one job basically, right? They spent about 30 years in a particular company and then retired and pension and whatever, after that, right? Then you had people trying to be in one industry more or less, right? But now you have no idea where you can start and where you'll end up, right? So for people coming into the workforce at this point of time, like if a fresher is listening, or even someone who's 2 3 years experienced, how should he or she look at work itself over the next 30 or 40 years? What should he or she do to stay relevant?
See, lot of it is driven by personal initiative. Okay, let's not take that fact away, because everything as an employee, we expect the employer to actually spoon feed you, groom you in your career. So there is a lot of initiative which people miss out, and I think that is something which somebody coming into the career have to realize, that they are responsible for their own career. So don't expect somebody to handhold you for the next 40 years of your career. Take responsibility for your career and work in a company. When you work in a company, ensure that you're doing what you can. You have to really own the company in your mind. It's not that physical the ownership of shares or anything like that. That will come later. So one is a sense of ownership to your job, to your business, or to your that the task you do. So the sense of ownership is very important. So once you start getting into that zone, so you'll have to see as a as a if you look at your career, if you're really somebody who wants to grow in your career, do jobs of increasing responsibility and so on, and also evaluate whether your company has got that kind of canvas to offer you opportunity. So it is today, you can be in one company, but you can do different jobs, or it's you to take it as a project today, because it's 30 years, 40 years doing the same job, having the same routine. Those days are gone, right? We've seen people going to the factory in the same bus, coming back in the same bus in the evening, 5:30. So that era is over. So today, if you take a career, you can still spend 30 years, 40 years in a company. You can spend your lifetime in a company, provided that the company organization is growing. You also have an opportunity to grow along with the organization, and you have an opportunity to do different. It could be different, the line of business could be different, where you get an opportunity in different line, or it could be a different geography, or you can look. So there are multiple opportunities uh, you can create in the same organization without not necessarily hopping jobs. So one has to look at one's career with that lens, to say that, am I learning something? Is that how am I improving as a professional? Every day I am on the job. Is the organization facilitating my learning? So that is very important. So some organizations don't, some organizations do. So ultimately, that will decide whether how much time you end up spending in a company.
Right.
So that is my take. So there is no one answer to your question, Kareem. So it is very, but at the same time, you don't want, people thinking that I need to do a new job every year or every 6 months. That's not possible, right? So you need to have some sort of, people do tend to get bored in what they do very soon. And they say, I have nothing left to achieve in this company. A lot of people come to us saying that that is why they want to change. And that would be, the nothing left to achieve would be in span of 18 months, 12 months, 18 months. So we often worry, what is wrong, So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I run into those conversations as well. People, kids who are like 22, 23, maybe. Talking about there's no future in this work or whatever for me, right? And it calls into question what we are doing at our at our jobs, really. So, Gaurav, the mindset shift has been so stark, right? I wrote this some time back that my father decided to quit the job, right? And he took 10 years to do it. So he waited 10 years until he could actually do it, right? And maybe it would have been shorter for me, but then today people have a very different mindset in terms of what they expect out of a job itself. And it's also because I guess we are getting more prosperous, we have more options, opportunities at this point of time, right?
and also one point, Kari, which we actually often don't give so much importance, is today's generation. They've actually, their parents have done what they have done, and actually they put them in a secure place. So your father's generation had no choice but to actually stick to a job,
Correct.
stick to a career, so that he
Yeah.
can ensure that their children are well brought up and so on and so forth. So today, there is no economic pressure for you to actually bring food to the table every month, in a lot of cases. So that is what gives you the freedom of choice. Say you can just, I've seen actually kids dropping out of engineering after 2 years saying that they want to pursue a career in music. I would have got slaughtered even if I had thought on those lines, say some 20 years ago. So that was not possible. So that gives you the freedom of choice.
Right.
And somebody else worked hard, and today you have freedom of choice for the current generation. I think that also is the other factor which we need to consider.
Yeah,
And we'll
so
come to that when we talk about gig and so on, but that
Yeah.
is later in the conversation, I
right.
presume. Yeah,
No,
sorry.
I remember this conversation very well when I went and told my dad that, look, this engineering thing, I don't think it's working out. I think I want to do literature. And he said that there are easier ways to be a waiter, right? So, so I mean, I guess, Gaurav, so this is that it has pluses and minuses, right? I mean,
Right.
God knows we could do with more musicians than IT engineers in some sense, right? So,
Right.
but from an employer perspective, it makes it definitely tricky, right? How do you attract the best and the smartest guys, and then, more importantly, how do you retain these guys? How do you give them something to keep coming back every day? Because a lot of these people seem to want something that is mission driven, as Sudarshan rightly pointed out. Economic aspects are less relevant, not, I won't say not relevant, but less relevant now compared to like few generations before. So what can an employer do?
Yeah, so I like to quote Simon Sinek here, who says that your purpose should be at the center of everything. I think that's going to be true. That's the generation currently has other challenges. They have submitted the locus of control outside of themselves. So which means initiative needs to be taken by the organization to define purpose for them. And if the organization's purpose aligns with the purpose of the employee, then it's easier for the employees to rationalize staying with the organization for long. If it does not, then they are sort of a little lost. Whether or not you and I agree with this is how the Gen Z mindset is aligned. However, I think beyond this, the organization also has to create an environment where non-traditional disruptions happen. So most organizations are quite happy recruiting for today. There is a requisition, let's recruit for today. And that's typically because the organization do not have a view of what they want to hire in the future right now. So I think talent acquisition or recruitment will have to be forward-looking. Will have to your engagement with your talent pool will also have to be forward-looking. More strategic, where you engage with a potential set of employees way before in time, and you prime them for joining the organization by engaging with them even before you had an employment conversation.
Right.
That's going to be critical. How do you do it? Of course, leverage digital again. There are so many easy ways to reach potential employee pool.
Right. Sudarshan, so much of these changes that we're talking about obviously will have to be led by business, but then there is this whole facet of HRs, right? Who still function as an operational necessity and not as a strategic function in many ways, if you look at it, right? We all believe people are the solution to a lot of problems. But then often, HRs act as the Jaya Vijayas of the corporate world, how do they get to be more strategic in these decisions and in these calls that organizations are going to make?
So see, there are different types of people in every function, and there are some we do see some great HR managers who are actually shaping thinking of around people in organizations. So it's actually a function of how the leadership top down is looking at human resources as a strategic asset, and hence the human resources leadership gets empowered to act in a fashion which will add to the business. Okay, so I think if you forward-looking human resources managers, when they look at organizations, I think what is coming to the core now is that today we are not straitjacketing people. We're looking at fungibility of talent, the learnability we spoke in terms of and the agility is something which is so commonplace. We use that word for everything today. But more important is fungibility of talent and learnability and multi-dimensional. So when I say multi-dimensional, some people who can actually do different jobs. I mean, you have to actually don't get categorized. I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. So you actually, if the organization, if it's supportive and give people the opportunity and let people take the risk. There is a risk if you put a new guy. I mean, because ultimately we're not launching rockets in organizations today. I mean, there you require specialized knowledge in terms of your what you're doing. But most organizations actually, if you look at the roles, there is a lot of fungibility which can be built into the way we actually groom people. So human resources is also, they're also part of this change. So the HR organizations are not isolated in this entire thing of everybody else around them is changing and HR guys are not changing. I think they're also part of this change. So I would think it is very case-to-case definition. But despite all the change we are talking all over the place today, everything is changing, but some organizations will never change. I can tell you that, and they will continue to operate the way they will operate. And at some point, because they had some advantage because of the product or service or something what they're delivering, they will be relevant for some time, but over time they will become irrelevant. So that is what only time will take a toll on such organizations which don't change. So I think that is my take. And somebody else will come. I mean, whoever thought look at, simplest example is our ride-hailing business. Whoever thought the way that entire, you would be at the mercy of auto rickshaw drivers and taxi drivers for your next ride. So now so that they were able to disrupt the entire thing. So their disruption will ultimately get everybody to either change or they will perish. I mean, at least that's the sense one gets.
Gaurav, your thoughts on this as well? The HR of tomorrow, how he or she has to be?
Firstly, I think recruitment or talent hiring should not be a HR function. I have a radical view on that. I think it's a business function. HR needs to play a facilitator. Business needs to play an active role and not shirk off responsibility in that. That becomes one. Second, I completely agree with Sudarshan on fungibility of talent, right? But for that, organizations need to create better understanding of what they have inside. Fundamentally, all job can be broken down into subunits, which are skills and competencies required for the job. So if you have a skill and competency view of your organization, you can better deploy talent within the organization, thereby reducing flab and therefore engaging in more strategic talent initiatives by attracting future-looking talent. So this is better use of your talent budget, so as to say. So their HR, I think, has a very big role to play in understanding what lies within and how it can be best redeployed.
Right.
And I think, to your point, Gaurav, HR also can play a key role. It's like when we talk talent management. So you actually divide the company in blocks of 30 people each or so on. So there will be a leadership group, then there will be a middle management group. So you can actually break it up amongst the organization to say, and then manage them, micromanage their careers in a sense, kind of understand what are their aspirations, what are their motivations, is the organization supportive of that, or is there something which we can do? How can we harness their potential? So if you're actually able to do that, the organizations will be far more effective than because a lot of times people leave organizations because of they believe they're not important in the scheme of things. They believe they're not getting the right opportunities. So if you're actually able to manage them in a more closer fashion and build that relationship at every level, organizations will get instead of, actually most of the times we get into a lot of this esoteric stuff, getting people to do, different kinds of assessments and so on and so forth, but not act on it.
Correct.
And then it goes into the file folder and nobody looks at it ever after.
No, I really like the micromanagement of careers. I think that's key, where you have a personalized career plan for every individual. I think it's beautiful.
True.
So that actually was going to be my follow-up question. You guys have nicely set the base for it, which is hiring is one aspect of it, right? Then there is the whole onboarding aspect of it, right? And especially now it's gotten, super complicated because, likely you will be onboarding this person remotely. How does he or she, meet with the functions, get an understanding of the company, align with the mission, so on and so forth. And here again, the HR function becomes super important, right? In terms of onboarding these people in the right way, and then helping them with the right nudges and so on and so forth. So Sudarshan, on that point, what would you advise, in terms of onboarding? And
it's a difficult task in a pandemic, especially, we have onboarded managing directors and CEOs during this time. And while working remotely is all right with people who already have established relationships in the organization and so on, then it is still all right. But people who come into the organization at this time have a challenge in terms of to get what we say, right, the touch and feel of the organization.
The dynamics.
Because the dynamics, the if I had to use the word, the political interplay in an organization, because you hardly get to meet, even on a Zoom call, you don't get to see that, you can't observe body language even you can with those multiple screens and so on, but nevertheless it's not like interacting with the team and understanding the dynamics, what goes in. So it is a challenge during this time, but we believe this is not going to be a permanent thing. We will ultimately go back to some offices and some level of physical interaction will happen with people. So even in normal world, onboarding is such an important thing. When you're bringing in somebody, it's about 3 to 6 months of hand-holding the person into the new organization and kind of get him understand the culture, the various aspects of the organization before he kind of makes up his mind in terms of which direction he's. So if you don't onboard people in a right fashion, what happens is people then get into this they assume a lot of things, they form opinions, and we've actually seen a couple of cases at senior leadership. Things have actually gone wrong in 6 months because of lack of the physical onboarding in a globally disparate organization. Otherwise, this person would have made multiple trips to US or London or wherever they had these other functional managers. So that has created a lot of challenges. And in 6 months, already people have formed an impression that this person is not going to be effective, and vice versa, that this organization is not for me. So it's important that we find a way and you digitally onboard. So organizations are taking that extra effort. You have to spend more time to get people to know each other. And a lot of times when you join a new organization, most new hires fail when you're actually when the expectations are not set or what to expect is not communicated upfront. So that is where one needs to spend a lot of time, even during the interview process, in terms of what to expect. Culturally, how is it like? How does this organization operate? Do you have the ability to actually adapt? Because most successful organizations will not change because there is an individual who comes in with a different mindset. Organizations won't change that easily. Only the individual has to adapt. So how do you prepare the individual to adapt to a new setting, new organization? That's the key aspect.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot more to work than work itself, right? I mean, to get used to this sort of dynamics and then be in a position where you can deliver effectively. So Gaurav, we referenced gig economy earlier, and it's a dramatically different way of looking at work itself, where you look at work as more of a project or a gig, right? How does this change things for both employers and employees?
So I think firstly, let's all acknowledge that gig is inevitable. It's bound to happen for the right reasons, um, and especially now ushered in by this phase of the pandemic. What has happened is hiring freezes have happened across the board. Most multinationals would have completely had a blanket ban on getting in people on a fixed payroll. Does this mean that the quantum of work reduces? Not at all. In fact, if you speak to a lot of people in the industry, they'll tell you that the amount of work they've been doing through the pandemic has been far greater than what they were used to. So where do you substitute for the increase in demand, right? Where do you get help? You look at the people who can come in on a fixed term basis or for a gig, right? Then there are other projects like transformational projects, which could be financial transformation or HR transformation or IT transformation, where you require specialists who don't necessarily need to be on your payroll forever, but who come in, do the job, fix the problem, and go. And that kind of expertise could be at a premium, but for a defined period. So that becomes another attractive proposition. For the employee, it is very it's a I think a boon in many ways. People who are absolute specialists now can get a premium for their skills. They can be their own boss. They can decide to do more with their time. They don't have to be bound by a organizational sort of boundary to define how they grow, how much they earn, where do they live, how do they travel, and all of that, right? So they can be, in true sense, their own masters. Uh, it obviously throws out of the window the traditional norm of job security, but it gives you what you can call as a project security. You get projects after projects, so you work in area that interests you. You don't have to do a lot of other things that you would otherwise have to do in a larger organization. So I think gig is here to stay. How best can organizations make use of it is up to the organization's mindset and agility.
Right. Sudarshan, your comments?
I think Gaurav covered a lot of points on that. But yeah, it doesn't actually fit into your original concept of careers and ownership and so on and so forth. So gig is obviously very temporary in nature. And that's the nature of the beast today, So organizations are comfortable with that. But one thing is clear that gig workers are never going to be the core of the organization. I think they have to be comfortable, and they are probably comfortable with that fact that they are not the organization's future. They are probably the sort of a here and now kind of a workforce. And as they view organizations also view them in that way. So there isn't any commitment on either side.
Right.
So, and that works well for people these days. So perhaps, so there are a set of individuals who are comfortable with that.
Yeah. Perhaps, I mean, it reflects a sort of a mindset shift also, right? I mean, not so much of a long-term thinking, both from, an employee and an employer perspective. So, Sudarshan, we're almost at the end of the podcast. And, one thing that I wanted to ask the both of you was, the role of the government in any of this, right? And in leveraging this people, skill, and resources that we have. Oftentimes, we hear about this demographic dividend, right, being spoken about in industry forums and so on and so forth. That we'll have the youngest working population across the world, etc. What must the government do specifically to leverage this demographic dividend?
Okay, so I have 2-3 points in that, Carrie. One is the government taking the role of directly creating jobs. That era is over. We can't expect the government to open factories and set up factories and blah blah to kind of create thousands of jobs. That is over. So what can the government do? So, and here, if you look at even our focus of our conversation, we are focused on, typically it's in the construct of around large companies which create employment and so on and so forth. So just let's take a shift away. India is a land of entrepreneurs. We have, you just walk outside, you will see only entrepreneurs, right? From your small kirana shop wala to, and they're all creating jobs. Each one of these small enterprises they create 3, 4, 5 jobs. So what can the government do? One is, even as a society, how can our mindset change? Can we celebrate those entrepreneurs, the small micro entrepreneurs? When I say celebrate, not go and garland them or anything like that, respect them. Because today, if somebody says, I work in XYZ, say I work in this company, the society tends to give that person more respect than somebody who actually runs a small business. You know, so he runs a small outfit, you look at him differently, saying kuch chota chala raha hai, something is doing. So can that mindset change? So that starts there. How do we respect these small micro entrepreneurs? Second, how can the government actually make it easy for these folks to do business? We talk of ease of doing business for large companies. We only talk, if you look at open any newspaper, Economic Times, you talk about large companies, ease of doing business. They get everything on a platter. What does the small enterprise get? Is the government even bothered about them at that level? We have MSMEs and so on and so forth, but that is very bureaucratic. So how can we support them? And it also flows down, right? The small entrepreneurs also support the larger enterprises. So there has to be a complete ecosystem. How do we respect these folks? How do we make it easy for them to do their jobs? If we do that, then we would have, and then the most important thing is dignity of the jobs, what we do. So today we look at people based on what they do, and accordingly we kind of, some people we respect, some people we don't respect, some people we disrespect. So there are multiple layers of respect inbuilt in our psyche. So how do we change that approach when we look at people and jobs? If we do that, I think we will reap a demographic dividend. So people can be comfortable working in a small outfit, small enterprise, yet retain their dignity of labor. And if we are supportive, as if the government is focused on making their lives easier, then we will find jobs for everybody. So job is not that we have to go and work in an IT services company or work in a bank or something. People can still and let's not forget, these are the largest job creators for us, these small micro entrepreneurs. So right. I think that is my take on how do we reap the demographic dividend. Just a little bit offbeat from our regular thing of how do we create mass job. Because that era is over, because we already have telecom, we have banking, digital is already disrupted. So it is going to be very difficult to find an industry which will employ thousands of people at one shot now. People who already have lakhs of people on their payroll, they're only going to reduce over time because of digital disruption and all those things what we spoke so far. Right. Then the future is with these small and micro enterprises.
Fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. So I work at a startup, and startups have become something that have that shine and allure right now. Every kid wants to work at a startup, right? And essentially what Sudarshan is saying is, don't just look for these established companies and whatever. It could be startups or even non-traditional jobs or employment as such, right? And be open to that, and the government should sort of facilitate that. And spur innovation and spur growth in those things rather than directly employ people. So Gaurav, your comments on that?
Sure. So I think advising the government is always a tough task, because you understand the quantum of the problem that they are trying to solve. But here's what I want to point out. One, the pandemic has affected the lower income group, the lower rung of the pyramid, the highest. People who have small savings and have less educational backing, those have been the worst affected, and they'll continue to be more affected with disruptions like automation, etc. That's going to come in. However, this is also the segment which is also the most unorganized. When I say unorganized, I'm not necessarily saying in terms of union, but in terms of just does the government, for example, have a skill inventory? Does it know how many people with particular skill sets are available within the state or the country? So create a skill inventory. Second, identify what is market demand. So therefore, you also identify the gap. You help in skilling by having more relevant skilling courses available, and then you use this skill database to also showcase the the country, the state, the district, or whatever, as a place where investment should come in. I think we are at the cusp of a great opportunity, or we are already there in the middle of that, with the global, trend towards diversifying supply chains and investing in India. Uh, uh, you know, do we really have it in us to grab that opportunity? Of course, ease of doing business needs to sort of still go from wherever it is to a great deal. There's so many uh, things that you need to. You still need you register a company, a PAN, a TAN, a PF, ESIC, Shop Act, whatnot, right? And then industry-specific licenses which run. How difficult are you making it for new employment to come in? And I'm purely taking an employment view to come in for thousands and thousands of people. Anything that you do towards this is going to add to huge percentage difference in the lives of thousands and thousands of people. That I think is what I would say the government could do.
Right.
And then employment is also not restricted to college graduates, right? You have different types of people. There is a need to actually keep them occupied on a productively. So I think that's going to be the bigger challenge. Of course, the college graduates and the tons of engineering graduates who come out of our institutes, keeping them occupied is another challenge. But look at it. So the government can only do so much, in my view. But these are some small levers. If they're able to push, I think this will make a quantum difference in terms of, again, going back to small enterprises, because everybody provides an opportunity, or they can start something on their own. So everybody need not have started a large industry, but they can create something, they can start something. You mentioned about skills, right? It could be right from, it can be anything, right from, people can. I mean, I think that's I think the Prime Minister has spoken about the vocational training and getting people the skills, what it is. And also, large organizations are doing quite a bit on the CSR front when it comes to actually training people to become basic plumbers or electricians, so that they are all self-employed. So, generating self-employment opportunities also should be a big part of this entire effort. And going forward, that I think that should be a huge driver for keeping people productive and making them employable, either as by themselves or as part of a establishment.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, and education is, something that we didn't touch upon in this episode, but something we've discussed earlier as well, the national education policy and so on. What educated means will dramatically change going forward itself, and there might have to be employment for various types and forms of people, right? So that's a great point. Gaurav and Sudarshan, this has been a fascinating chat. Over the last 1 hour, we've uncovered various facets of HR and various facets of employment and so on and so forth. Before I let you go, I mean, I would love to ask you for your recommendations on books and podcasts that people should check out. So maybe Gaurav, you can start, and then Sudarshan can add.
I think Wealth at the Bottom of the Pyramid is a great book for any entrepreneur to read. So there's so much to do and so much opportunity at the bottom of the pyramid. I would highly recommend that.
Right.
So I would still if somebody is asking, now that Jack Welch is out of fashion, but I would still ask people to go and read Straight from the Gut. We spoke about fungibility of talent, and getting people to do different things. I think there is no bigger master than Jack Welch. The way he. But I don't know. Some more people don't talk about him anymore. But yeah, everybody has there is a time period in which people think of any leader.
Right.
But to me, the most impact. I mean, I think Straight from the Gut is something I can keep reading that again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I guess, they'll never run out of fashion, right? Jack Welch or Stephen Covey and so on and so forth. They're going to be classics. So again, thank you so much, Gaurav and Sudarshan. This was a fascinating chat. Thanks so much for your time on a Sunday morning, no less. Thank you.
Pleasure, Kari. And good luck. Thank you so much. Thanks, Gaurav. Pleasure.
Thanks, Sudarshan.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by the team at Bharat Vartha. If you liked this podcast, then don't forget to share, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite platforms. We're available on Anchor, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, YouTube, and a host of other platforms. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you do wish to offer us any feedback on the content or anything else, do reach out to us on social media or get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.